Fakultas Kedokteran Universitas Lampung berada di jantung kota Bandar Lampung. Berdiri sejak tahun 2002, Fakultas Kedokteran Universitas Lampung memiliki lulusan yang tersebar di seluruh Indonesia. Sejak tahun 2012, Fakultas Kedokteran Universitas Lampung telah menggunakan kurikulum berbasis kompetensi dengan pendekatan problem-based learning.
Salam kedokteran.
Saya kedokteran.
Saya.
Satu kedokteran.
Satu.
Berdirinya Fakultas Kedokteran Universitas Lampung diawali pada tahun 2002 dengan diterimanya SK penyelenggaraan program studi pendidikan.
Is around 130,
Mahasiswa program studi pendidikan dokter Fakultas Kedokteran Universitas Lampung pernah memperoleh medali perunggu pada PIMNAS ke-31 tahun 2017. Kemudian rata-rata Pacemaker program studi pendidikan dokter Fakultas Kedokteran inilah yang lulus di PT UKM PPD dalam 3 tahun terakhir adalah 80% dan rata-rata Pacemaker PSPDF Unila yang lulus OSCE UKM PPD dalam 3 tahun terakhir adalah 90%. Kemudian, keketatan ujian masuk calon mahasiswa untuk masuk menjadi mahasiswa di Fakultas Kedokteran Universitas Lampung adalah tertinggi dibandingkan dengan program studi di lingkungan Universitas Lampung.
Represent their absence.
Merujuk pada capaian-capaian prestasi tersebut, maka dengan belajar di Fakultas Kedokteran,
we could start our class. Maybe I open a little sentences opening. Okay. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good day. Selamat siang. Tabi pun, Prof. Tabi pun. You have to answer iya pun.
Yeah, pun.
Okay. And all student, I hope you, okay student, we will start our first world class professor with Professor Cheng Ming today. With the topic is about cardiovascular system physiology. So we have invited the best speaker in this class. So I hope all of you will be active and could follow the class. And maybe if you have something want to ask, you could ask in the discussion session. Maybe for the first time, we will give the Professor Cheng Ming the time to present about the lecture of cardiovascular system physiology. Okay, Prof. This is your turn, Prof. Thank you, Prof.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you, Dr.
Thank you, Prof.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Nisa, for arranging this. So I have been meeting several groups of students in other medical schools in Indonesia, especially in the last year when students as well as lecturers are locked down. So communication is still possible through this kind of educational platform. So that's quite useful. So in some sense we are not locked down. In fact, there were many opportunities to extend the borders even wider through this kind of platform. Yeah. So I've been able to speak to the medical students in other countries besides Indonesia. And in fact, this same lecture was given just a few weeks ago in Java because they also asked for a 1-hour lecture on cardiovascular system. Just a broad overview. So I gave the same lecture in Yogyakarta, I think. The International Islamic, I can't remember the name. It's Islamic University of Indonesia. Sorry, University Islam Indonesia. Yeah, UII in Yogyakarta. So so the way I did this in UII was was one of the new things I tried to do, and that was to get some involvement of students during my lecture. So we had time to plan this. So I've decided to keep the faces of the students from UII in my PowerPoint slides. You will see them because they actually took part at certain points in the lecture. I tried to do the same thing with some of your classmates that I've got to know, but we were a little bit late. It's a little bit short notice, so I couldn't organize the 10 students to do the same thing for this class in Lampung. But anyway, maybe there'll be another time. Maybe when we meet in April for the renal physiology, we can plan ahead and get some of you involved as part of my lecture. So the students actually said something during my lecture. They prepared something, and I then expanded. Okay, so so with that introduction, let's share screen now. And what I'm going to do is ask Dr. Nisa to allow you to have my PowerPoint so that you don't have to feel you have to rush to copy the notes. Okay.
Okay.
So, yeah. So
Herman bisa buka ini deh, buka Prof Ming jadi co-host ya, Pak Herman. Mr. Herman, please open the share.
Okay. So this is a PowerPoint. Okay.
Okay, you could open, Prof.
Okay. So I haven't sent the PowerPoint slides yet to Dr. Nisa, but I'm going to send it to Dr. Nisa. And Dr. Nisa, you can freely share the slides with your students so that they can just focus on listening and so that they don't have to rush through trying to copy all the notes. Okay. So yeah. So welcome to my lecture. Yeah. So this is a general overview. So we normally give the cardiovascular class in about 6 to 7 hours. So it's actually quite a big topic. So today is just about 1 hour. So I'm just going to introduce some of the key concepts and principles that relates to the heart, the blood vessels, and the two main parameters that are controlled, that is the blood volume and the blood pressure. Okay, so this is a big picture, and let's start. Okay, so yeah, so this is not my dog, yeah, and this is not my granddaughter, although I have a grandson since last September, yeah, okay. But this is a fun picture to start with. Yeah. Okay, the first question to ask, and yeah, because this is online, it's difficult to get a response. So I will just pause. So the first question to ask is, how many circulations are there in the cardiovascular system? Okay. So normally in a real class, students I can see them and they can respond. So let me give you a few seconds to think about. Okay. So most of you will probably say there are two, the systemic circulation and the pulmonary circulation. So most of my own students in University Malaya also say two. And I tell them at this point that functionally, in terms of function, not just anatomy, you actually have four different circulation, not just two. Okay, so what are the four? One is obviously the systemic circulation here, the systemic. The second one is the pulmonary circulation. Okay, the third one is actually something called the micro circulation. Okay, micro circulation refers to the capillaries. So you normally will get a separate lecture on the exchange processes here, which we call the microcirculation. Okay, so this is the third circulation. And then obviously you can see the fourth circulation, and this is the lymphatic circulation. Okay, so functionally there are 4 circulation, and they are all connected to one another. Okay, so that's the first point. So, so this is just another way of looking at the cardiovascular system. Red, obviously, oxygenated blood in the arterial system, and blue, the venous blood from the tissue, okay, after the oxygen has been used. So, so my next question is, if you look at the heart, obviously there's a right ventricle side, right pump, and then you have the left pump. Second question is, if you look at the diagram, would you think that the two sides of the hearts are arranged in parallel or in series? So again, I give you a few seconds to think about it. So are the 2 sides of the heart arranged in parallel or in series? Okay. So if you say in parallel, because it looks like parallel, actually the correct concept is that the 2 sides of the heart are arranged in series. Okay, series just means that if you stretch out the whole of the cardiovascular system, because the whole thing is a closed loop, right? So if you stretch it out, you find that this part is connected to this part. You stretch it out. So actually the right side and the left side, they are actually arranged in series, because the blood from the right side is pumped to the lungs, and then it goes into the left side, and then that is circulated to the rest of the body. Okay, so it's in series. Okay, now we'll come to why that is important to consider that the arrangement of the 2 sides are in series. Okay, but let's look at the next slide. Okay, now definitions are very important in physiology. So I have spelled it this way. This is my own word. You won't find this in the dictionary. This is because definition means physiological definition. Okay, so the first word to define is cardiac output, or we in Malaysia, when we were using the Bahasa Malaysia quite many years ago, we call this output jantung, cardiac output. Okay, so maybe you call it by different. The cardiac output in the English textbook means the volume of blood which is pumped out, and I stress here, each ventricle. Okay, so the definition is not volume of blood pumped out by the heart, because the heart has 2 ventricles. So it's by each ventricle, either the left or the right ventricle. Okay, so which means that in terms of function, the pumping heart, you actually have 2 pumps, the right ventricle and the left ventricle. So which means that you actually have 2 cardiac outputs, right ventricle cardiac output and left ventricle cardiac output. Okay, and so this is the point here. The right and the left ventricles are arranged as 2 pumps in series. Okay, SERIES, in series. Okay, so let's move to the next slide. Okay, now let me ask you a question. This is for interaction, and again, the online format is not the most ideal, but it's okay. I give you some time to think. So which organ receives the largest volume of blood per minute? Okay, so is it the brain, the heart, the kidneys, the gastrointestinal? This is CNY is Chinese New Year because yes, in Chinese New Year you eat a lot. So is this the gastrointestinal organ during Chinese New Year? Okay, Chinese New Year just over a few weeks ago. Or the skeletal muscles during exercise, or the lungs. Okay, so what do you think? Yeah. Okay, just a few seconds. Now the answer is the lungs. Okay, so I've given you the answer because this is a different color. It's in blue. Yeah. So now, why is it the lungs? Okay. Now this is why you need to understand why I said that the two pumps are in series. Okay, it's the lungs. Okay, let me just go to the next slide. Okay, so these are three students, Alvin, Reza, and Zania from UII, who actually came in and spoke for a few minutes during the lecture. So it was quite fun, and they tried to explain why it is the lung, okay, of all the organs, okay. But we are not able to do this with your students because the names were selected quite late, okay. So we needed about at least 5 days there. Anyway, so okay. So now the blood flow in the whole of the cardiovascular system is in a closed loop. Okay, it's a closed loop. So I think you notice the left cardiac output, the cardiac output from the left ventricle is distributed to many organs, to the brain, to the muscle, to the GI tract. But the right cardiac output, the cardiac output from the right side, where is that distributed? From the right side. All the cardiac output from the right side goes to the lungs. Yeah, all of it. So what we are saying here is that the value of your blood flow to the lungs is equal to the cardiac output from the right ventricle. So that is why the lungs receives the highest volume of blood per minute. The lungs are the only organs that receives all the cardiac output, which is the cardiac output from the right ventricle. Okay, this is an important concept. Do you all follow that? Okay. So we have time. So is there any question now? You can ask now. You don't have to wait till the end. Any immediate question?
Okay, student. Okay, so student. In this class, all of you can open your voice and then you ask the question. If you see something want to ask, you could say it. You can. Prof. Cheng will give you chance to ask in any time he give.
Yeah. So we can have. So do you all follow this?
Okay.
So before we move on,
maybe one of you or maybe a few of you want to ask something after this few first slide. Okay.
Okay.
Please.
If no question, we will move on. Okay. So this is the first point. Okay. This is my own drawing, which I do a lot to illustrate why. So this is separated. This is obviously, it's like two hearts, but obviously this is left ventricle. This is the right ventricle. So, so this is to illustrate that in the closed circulatory loop, you have the two ventricles in series. The right ventricle cardiac output is the pulmonary blood flow, and then the left ventricle cardiac output is distributed to many organs. Okay. Now, the concept that the two hearts, the two sides of the hearts are in series has important clinical application. And the next point is important. The value of the cardiac output here, left ventricle, and here, right ventricle, must be the same over time. Okay, it has to be the same because we are now in a closed loop. What happens, okay, let me ask you a question. What happens if the left ventricle cardiac output and the right ventricle cardiac output is not the same? Just imagine what will happen. It's like, imagine that this is like a traffic, the car traffic, okay? So we sometimes call this blood flow traffic, okay? So what happens if this one here and this one here is not the same? Okay, for example, let's say if you have left ventricle, left heart failure, sometimes we call it, okay? Sometimes when you have heart failure, not the two pumps doesn't become abnormal at the same time. Sometimes the left side, sometimes the right side, okay? So let's imagine if the left heart fails, the left ventricle fails, this means that the cardiac output from the left ventricle is less than the cardiac output from the right ventricle. Okay, so will you have any problem? What do you think? Yeah, imagine this is like a traffic. You will have problem, right? Because if this is lower now, and this is normal,
Congestion.
yeah, you will have blood traffic congestion here. Okay, and this is precisely what happens in left heart failure. You have congestion, vascular congestion. We call it vascular congestion, like blood traffic congestion, in the pulmonary circulation. And so you will end up most likely with pulmonary edema because of the congestion. Okay. So now if the opposite happens, if you have right heart failure, it means the cardiac output here is low, whereas the cardiac output here is normal. Where will the congestion be? Now the congestion will be here, right? Because this is normal, but this is now no longer equal to this, okay? So you have congestion here, and so when you have left heart failure, the vascular congestion is in the peripheral circulation. And so you will develop clinically peripheral systemic edema, okay? So the concept that both sides of the heart are in series has very important implication that both your cardiac output must be the same. And in the body, there is a mechanism that will ensure that over time, both the left cardiac output and the right cardiac output is the same. Because if it is not the same, as I've just tried to explain, you will have either congestion in the pulmonary circulation or congestion in the peripheral circulation. Okay? Follow that? Okay? Are you okay now so far? Then we move on.
Yeah. So far, so good for me, Prof. But I don't know the student.
Yeah.
But maybe they understand, but they can't speak. They don't confidence to speak something.
Yeah. Anyway, it's such a big group of students. It's okay. Yeah. We can leave the questions for after, or maybe even after the session. They can always contact me here. Okay. So let's move on. Okay. So now we come to Dr. Nisa. Have they already done cardiovascular? Or
not yet, Prof. This is first, not yet, Prof. This is the first meeting for cardiovascular physiology.
Right. So I give you a big picture. Yeah. Okay. So the cardiac output is defined by two things called the stroke volume and the heart rate. Okay. Stroke volume, heart rate. In Bahasa Malaysia, we used to call it volume denyutan. Every stroke or every beat. Every time the heart beat, how much blood comes out. Okay, so roughly is about 70 to 80 mil each time. Okay, and so if the heart beats 70 times per minute, then the total volume of blood which is pumped out per minute will be 5,000. This is a mistake here. It's not liters. 5,000 mil, ml. Okay, 5,000 mil per minute. Okay, change this. Yeah. So 70 times 70, about 5,000 mil per minute, okay? So now, this value is the normal cardiac output, 5 liters, not 5,000, 5 liters per minute or 5,000 mil per minute. Now, the blood volume in a 70 kilogram male adult. Now, I put my name here because once upon a time, I was 70 kilogram but male adult hasn't changed, okay? So now this is the physiological, I think we need, maybe some mics are not muted because there's an echo. Is everybody's mic muted? Maybe Nita, you have to mute your mic. Yeah, okay, yeah, that's right. So the blood volume in a 70 kilogram male adult is 5 liters. So all the values in your textbook or in your lecture is always with reference to this 70 kilogram male adult, okay? So 5 liters of blood and cardiac output is 5 liters per minute. So this means that in the normal person, you are able to circulate the total blood volume in 1 minute. Okay, 5 liters per minute. Okay, so the heart rate is obviously, you have not done this, but I think everybody knows that your heart has the capability of beating on its own. We call this auto rhythmicity. Okay, you do not need any nerve or even circulating hormones to make the heart beat. Okay, we call this auto rhythmicity, and this is because there is a pacemaker that is able to generate the heartbeat. Okay, and this pacemaker, the name of this pacemaker is called SA node, sino-atrial node, located in the right atrium. Okay, sino-atrial node. Okay. Now, have they done autonomic nervous system? I think they have autonomic nervous system. So this SA node is controlled by both the sympathetic nerve as well as the parasympathetic nerve. So that is why we said it's a dual is two, sympathetic stimulus or parasympathetic stimulus. Okay, so it is controlled by, so sympathetic will increase the heart rate. We call this tachycardia, and parasympathetic action on the SA node will decrease the heart rate. We call this bradycardia. Okay, so the SA node sets a basic rhythm, basic heart rate. But if you have sympathetic, you increase heart rate. If you have parasympathetic acting on the SA node pacemaker, SA node, you will decrease the heart rate. Okay, so this is about heart rate, which you will learn in more detail. Now I want to look at something called a stroke volume. Okay, so the stroke volume is volume de Newton. Every time the heart beat, how much blood is pumped up. Okay, so roughly in a 70 kilogram male adult, is about 70 to 80 mil. Okay, 70 to 80 mil. Now this stroke volume obviously can increase when you are exercising. Okay, when you're exercising, so it can increase. So the next slide is to tell you 2 ways in which the stroke volume can increase. 2 ways. Okay, 2 ways. Okay, let's just skip this. Some question. Okay, stroke volume. So 2 ways, 1 and 2. The first way in which the stroke volume can increase is by something called Starling's mechanism or Starling's law. Sometimes called Starling's law of the heart. Okay. Now this one here is called an intrinsic mechanism. Intrinsic. Now, if you see the word intrinsic, it means that this is a natural property of the heart muscle. It's independent or does not require stimulation by nerve or stimulation by hormones. It is just an intrinsic natural property of all cardiac muscle. So what this means is that if you fill the ventricles with more blood, the muscles are more stretched and it will generate a greater tension and contract more. So that's why I call it more in, more out. Okay, this is Starling's mechanism of the cardiac muscle. If the ventricles are filled with more blood during relaxation, it will pump out more. Okay. Now the second way is obviously an extrinsic mechanism. Okay, this is intrinsic. Extrinsic means that you need stimulation by the nerve and in most cases also by the hormone. Okay, so the main nerve that supplies the heart is your sympathetic nerve. Okay, and in addition, you also have this adrenaline. Okay, adrenaline is a hormone that comes from adrenal medulla, and the adrenal medulla is stimulated by the sympathetic nerve. Okay, so the heart muscle is directly stimulated by the sympathetic nerve, and the heart muscles are also stimulated by circulating adrenaline. Okay, so when the adrenal medulla are stimulated by the sympathetic nerve, it releases adrenaline. And both this nerve and hormone can make the heart muscle contract stronger. So we use this word contractility. Okay, contractility means when the heart muscle is stimulated by sympathetic and or adrenaline, and it becomes, it will contract a greater amount of stroke volume. Okay, so now we will come to this in a short while. What is EDV? Okay, EDV just means N at the end, N diastolic volume. Diastole means when the ventricles are relaxing. Okay, diastole. Okay, so at the end of diastole, when the ventricles are relaxed, how much blood fills the ventricles? Okay, so end diastolic volume. So if you fill it with more blood, intrinsic mechanism, it will pump out more. So this is Starling's mechanism. More EDV, more SV. More in is more EDV, more out is more SV. Okay. Now this one here is even if you don't change the EDV, okay, this one you change. Even if you don't change the EDV, if you stimulate the heart muscle by nerve, sympathetic, or by adrenaline, the amount of blood, the volume de Newton, which is pumped out from the EDV will be greater. So which means that the SV over EDV becomes a greater fraction. Okay, so this is sometimes called ejection fraction. Okay, ejection fraction. So increased contractility has the same meaning as increased ejection fraction. Okay, so these are two ways in which the stroke volume can increase: intrinsic mechanism and extrinsic. Okay, intrinsic means you don't need nerve or hormone. Extrinsic means stimulated by nerve and hormone. Okay, and here you have, with the extrinsic stimulation, you have increased contractility, or also known as increased ejection fraction. Okay, so I think, yeah, okay. So, so this is just definition again, since you haven't done cardiovascular physiology yet. So in the cardiac cycle, we call it cycle because the heart is a rhythmic pump. It pumps, relax, pump, relax. Okay, there's a cycle. Okay, so the heart contracts and then relax, contract, relax. So contraction is just called systole, and relaxation we call it diastole. Okay, so when you talk about the change in the ventricle volume, the volume in the ventricle, before contraction minus after contraction obviously gives you the stroke volume. Okay, so before contraction obviously is how much blood fills the ventricle during diastole. That's why you call it N diastolic volume, minus after contraction would be N systolic volume. Okay, and this gives you the stroke volume. Okay, so you have this relationship EDV minus ESV equal to SV. Okay, you follow that? Okay, so okay, just ignore this. Okay, don't worry about this now. I want to show you a diagram to illustrate again the difference between the intrinsic and the extrinsic. This is intrinsic, Mr. Starling. Okay, and this is sympathetic or adrenaline. This is increased contractility. This is extrinsic. Okay, so this is my illustration here. Okay, so this is Starling's intrinsic mechanism. This is extrinsic mechanism, where you have increased contractility. Okay, so here you are, EDV, EDV. So if you increase EDV, more in, more out. Okay, but the ESV doesn't change. Okay, so this is Starling's law of the heart or mechanism. Now, in the extrinsic by nerve and hormone, you find that there is no change, even if you do not have a change in the EDV. But if you stimulate the heart by sympathetic or adrenaline, you get a bigger stroke volume. Okay, and so what is left behind, the ESV, is smaller. So which means that your ejection fraction has increased, SV over EDV. Okay, are you okay there so far? Okay, so
Maybe we could say that, sorry, Prof.
yeah.
We know that when we say about sympathetic or adrenaline stimulation, it will correlate with frequencies, heart rate frequencies.
No, that's a separate thing. Yeah.
So
this is stroke volume. This is all about stroke
similar
volume.
or different.
No, we are not talking about heart rate here. This is just stroke volume.
Only stroke volume.
Yeah.
Okay, bro.
Okay, let's move on. Okay, so as I said, you can have this PowerPoint slide and think about it, and we can communicate. Okay, so there's still a lot of information since you have not done cardiovascular. This is a very broad. Sometimes we call it bird's eye view. Okay, it's a big picture. Okay, let's move on. Okay, let's skip this. Okay, so at this point, so that is why I was very keen for students to interact. Unfortunately, we couldn't do it with Lampong student. So at this point, I got another 3 students from UII, and they then talk about some aspect of cardiovascular physiology. So these are this would have been your own classmate, and I think you would have made the lecture more interesting rather than me talking all the time. Okay, but maybe next round when we do the renal physiology, we can plan 1 week ahead. Okay. So the students actually had a rehearsal with me a few days before, okay? But we couldn't get this organized. Okay, so never mind. Okay, so now we come to this word called venous return. Now in Bahasa Malaysia, at that time, about 10 years ago, we used the word penbalikan vena, okay? In the Bahasa Malaysia textbook. Now it's all in English. What is the relationship between venous return and cardiac output? Okay, so we are back to the same concept that the cardiovascular system is a closed circuit, closed loop. So your cardiac output should be equal to the blood that returns to the heart. That's why we call it a venous return, right? It's a closed circuit. Follow that? So the cardiac output equal to venous return. Now this venous return that blood enters the heart, and this cardiac output, blood that is pumped out from the heart, actually is the same kind of idea as more in, more out, right? More EDV, more SV. But more EDV, more SV is per denyutan, 1 beat. But when you talk about over time, more in, venous return, more out, cardiac output. This is actually the same as what we mean by Starling's mechanism. It's the same concept. Okay, so this is just a picture of Mr. or Dr. Ernest Starling. Okay, the person who described this relationship, more in, more out. Okay, Mr. Ernest Starling, and this is called Starling. There's a star here. Starling's law of the heart. Okay, so you will definitely your lecture will probably cover this. Okay, Starling's law of the heart. I think in Bahasa you call it hukum Starling. Okay, Starling's law of the heart. Okay, so keep this in mind. He's a very famous physiologist, and we will be talking about him again subsequently. Okay, so let's move on. Okay, let's take a break and look at some Chinese character. Now, the Chinese character, I'm actually a Malaysian Chinese. My father came from China, and I was born in Malaysia. The Chinese character sometimes is very interesting because the character most likely was written based on what the person saw in real life. So this actually looks like the Chinese character for heart. Okay, it's written one stroke here, and then there's a circle, one stroke inside, and one stroke outside. Okay, so the Chinese character for heart actually looks like a ventricle, right? Do you agree? Yeah, so this is the right ventricle, this is the left ventricle, and then this stroke here would represent in blue the venous return, and this stroke here in red would represent the cardiac output. Okay, so the Chinese character for heart actually is interesting because it actually does look like the ventricle. Okay, this is just for general knowledge. Okay, at least we get a break from serious physiology knowledge. Okay, so let's move on. Okay, so now we're going to look at blood vessels. Okay, arterioles. Okay, not artery but arterioles. Now, as an introduction, SA note. Okay. Okay, what is the SA note for? Can anyone tell me? Maybe any student can unmute if you have been listening. What is the sinoatrial node? Anyone? Just unmute and tell us the answer.
Okay, student, you could unmute and then you
pacemaker.
help. Okay. Please.
Very good. Yeah, it's a pacemaker. Yeah. So the pacemaker we just mentioned is under dual control. That means you have both sympathetic that causes tachycardia or parasympathetic that causes a slowing of the heart rate. You call it bradycardia. Okay. Now the ventricles, in at least the human ventricles, do not have both sympathetic and parasympathetic. It is only sympathetic. Okay, the ventricles. So and the sympathetic nerves obviously. Oops, sorry, what happened here? The sympathetic nerves obviously is the can increase the stroke volume. We just discussed this. Have they done the autonomic nervous system alpha beta receptor? Have you done that? You have? Okay. So this is just information to say that the sympathetic nerves act on the beta receptor in the heart. Okay. Yeah. So now this part of the blood vessel called the arteriole, IOLES, okay, is also supplied or innervated by the sympathetic nerves. And these sympathetic nerves always cause a reduction in the radius. We call this vasoconstriction. Okay, it reduces the radius of the blood vessel, and this effect here is on the alpha receptor. Okay, in contrast to the beta receptor here. Okay, so this is by way of introduction. Let me go now to. Okay, let me explain what this is. This is from one of my books. Now, I want you to look at this long word, sympathoadrenal medullary axis. And if you have done the sympathetic system, you know that every time you stimulate the sympathetic system, for example, sympathetic system will act on the SA node. Sympathetic system will also act on the ventricle. Okay, this is a direct effect. Okay, but at the same time that you have increased sympathetic directly, you also have increased sympathetic to the adrenal medulla, which we have just mentioned. And this will release what? Adrenaline. Okay, and then the adrenaline will also act here and act there. Okay, so what we are saying here is that sympathetic have a direct effect and an indirect effect through the adrenal medulla adrenaline, and the adrenaline will then also act on the SA node. Adrenaline will also act on the ventricle. So this is an enhancement effect. Okay, so that's why we call this whole system sympathoadrenal medullary axis. Okay, just keep this in mind. Okay, so let's move on. Okay, so now we come to the first graph in cardiovascular physiology. So when you look at the graph, the first thing to look at is obviously your attention is drawn to this, but the important thing is always look at the axis, x-axis, and then the y-axis. The parameters are important, okay? So on the x-axis, it is basically different parts of the circulation. Aorta, then smaller arteries, then arterioles, okay? This is the arterioles, okay? Then the capillaries, then the venules, and then the veins, and then back to the right heart, okay? So this is obviously the left heart, where in the region of the aorta, so this is basically what is known as the systolic blood pressure and the diastolic blood pressure. Okay, diastolic is during relaxation and systolic during contraction. Okay, so obviously there is some fluctuation here, but the important point to note here is this very significant decline in the blood pressure. Okay, and this part here coincides with what? The arterioles. Okay, the sharpest drop in the blood pressure in the circulatory system occurs at the arterioles. And this is because the arterioles are smooth muscle structures, and it represents the major blood vessels that provides the vascular resistance. The resistance to blood flow in the circulation is mainly at the arterioles. And this is why you see the greatest pressure drop here. And for two reasons. One is that the arterioles are made up, quite a large part of the arterioles are smooth muscle structure. And smooth muscle, I think you might already know, have a basic muscle tone. And the second reason, as we mentioned in the previous slide, is that the arterioles are supplied by the sympathetic vasoconstrictor nerve. That's why there is always a high vascular tone. Okay, so at this point, yeah, so this is what would have been nice. At this point, we have another 3 students from UII, and it would have been nice to have a few students from Lampung to come in and break the long lecture, okay? So at least there's some interaction. Anyway, so these students explain a little bit about arterioles, and then, and then I continue to talk about the veins, okay? So next slide. So now we have more definition. So every system that you start off with, whether respiratory or renal or cardiovascular, you need to get used to the terminology, okay? The vocabulary in every system. Because once you understand the definition, then it affects how you understand the physiology. So vasoconstriction and venoconstriction. Now, generally, when you say vasoconstriction, this means blood vessel, okay? But functionally, most of this happens in the arterioles, which we just mentioned, okay? So the most important factor that affects the resistance is actually the radius, okay? The resistance is inversely related. Berkada songsang, we use it in Bahasa Malaysia. I think in Indonesia you call it berkada berbanding, berkada terbalik, is it something like that? Inversely related. Yeah, it's I think the different word. We say berkada songsang. I think you say berbanding terbalik, right? Something like that. Yeah. Anyway.
Berbanding terbalik, Prof. Berbanding
yeah.
terbalik.
Okay. Yeah. So this is inversely related.
Compare.
Yeah. Somebody told me that recently. Anyway,
Prof,
so
before we continue, there's 2 questions in our chat, but maybe you could.
I think we can move it to later.
Okay,
yeah.
It
so maybe let me just finish this slide. Okay. So small changes in the radius. If you reduce the radius by half, the resistance increase 16 times. 2 times 2 times 2 times 2. Okay. So that's why the change in the radius is the most important thing. Now, because flow is inversely related to resistance, so now flow is proportionally related to the radius to the power of 4. Okay. So now, if you want to talk about the veins, and the veins can also be constricted, you use the word the venoconstriction, okay? venoconstriction. So venoconstriction, so vasoconstriction will always increase the resistance, okay? But venoconstriction, the function of venoconstriction is not so much to change the resistance, because the veins are not like the arterioles. The function of the veins is to serve as capacity vessels. That's why we call it venous capacitance. Okay, so what do we mean by that? We say the veins are capable capacity vessels because the veins are more compliant. The English word is compliant. So if the structure is more compliant, it can be more easily stretched, and the capacity to hold or a given a greater volume of blood is more. Okay, so if you compare the veins and the arteries, the veins are more compliant than the arteries. So that's why the veins are capacity vessels. Okay, so so if you look at the total blood volume represented by this, like a pizza here, okay, you find that at any time, where do you find most of the blood volume? Here, there you are. Okay, at least 60% of your total blood volume at any time is actually found in the veins. Okay, that's why we call the veins the capacitance vessels. Okay, yeah, they are able. So so what happens is that venoconstriction will decrease the venous capacitance. Okay, that's the function. And what is the purpose of that? Now, if the venous capacitance is decreased, your venous return increases. Okay, let me say this again. If you venoconstrict and reduce the venous capacitance, what actually happens is that you increase the venous return. And remember, more venous return, more blood enters the heart, more will be pumped out. More venous return, more cardiac output, right? The Starling's law of the heart. Okay, so and the last point here is that the reason why the veins are more compliant than the arteries is because the veins has less elastic tissue. The arteries are more elastic than the veins, and in physiology, any structure that is more elastic actually has something called elastic recoil, RECOIL. Elastic recoil actually is a force that opposes stretch. So obviously, it's harder to stretch any structure that has a greater elastic recoil. Okay, so the veins has less elastic recoil compared to the arteries. Okay, so before we move on, maybe we can look at the questions. Yeah, what is the question? Can somebody tell me? Is that a chat box? Yeah?
Azmi Ada, can you say the question? Can you spell the question? Your question, yeah, for Prof. Cheng?
Two questions, right? Is it?
Okay, I read it for Prof with my spelling. Hello, Prof. First, I'm very grateful and happy to attend your class. It would be a good opportunity and experience for me. I would ask you about the basic differences in physiology between heart rate of normal people and athletes. Like Usain Bolt, number 1 sprinter in the world, he has low heart rate according to range number of normal heart rate. Right. But at the same time, his physical condition was good and healthy.
Yes, good.
Why and how it could be? I mean the reason behind it. It is related with the activities and maintaining cardiac output?
Yes.
Sorry for my English here. I think my grammar was not good enough. Thank you very much, Prof.
No, okay. First, we answer the first question. First of all, your English is quite good. Your grammar is fine. No problem. I can understand very well. Thank you for asking the question. That's an important question. Now, we just said that cardiac output is heart rate times stroke volume. Okay. So in trained athletes, you are right. We know that some of their heart rates are actually very low. We always, in the textbook, you always read normal heart rate is 60 to 70. This is the average heart rate. Now, if you have a stronger heart, it means that your stroke volume is much bigger than a normal person, right? You have a strong heart. That means your stroke volume is big. Now, cardiac output is heart rate times stroke volume. So if your stroke volume is very big, much bigger than normal because you have been training, then your heart rate actually can be less. Okay, because heart rate times stroke volume gives you the cardiac output. So it is the maintenance of a sufficient cardiac output. What happens is that every time the athlete heart pumps, it pumps out a greater amount.
Yes.
Which means you don't need to pump so many times. Okay, boom, boom. Okay, whereas if your heart is weak, sometimes it needs to pump more. Boom, 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 boom. Okay. So does that answer your question?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Optimizing of the ventricle volume, yeah, Prof, with the exercise that athlete doing. Okay, okay, Prof. And then next question, or maybe you continue first. There's
okay.
another question.
Maybe I continue first. Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
So let's look at. Okay, this one is just a question. You can look at it. Yeah. So just look at the top part here. Okay, this is a summary. Don't worry about this now. Okay, I'll explain this more later on. So the arterioles are considered as the resistance vessel. Okay, vasoconstriction. And just to remind you that this is under mono control. There's generally no parasympathetic, only sympathetic nerves are supplied to the arterioles. There are one or two exceptions, but generally only sympathetic to arterioles. Whereas the veins are the capacitance vessel, the one that stores most of the blood. Okay, so Veno-Constriction will reduce the venous capacitance and increase the venous return. Okay, yeah. So let's move on. Okay, this is the same picture. Okay, this is just a picture of the garden near my department. So we also have a very green campus. Let's just skip this. Okay, let's move to this. Okay, so we come to an important equation in cardiovascular physiology, and you will do this in detail. And this equation is blood pressure is cardiac output times something called the total peripheral resistance. Okay, resistance peripheral total, maybe in Bahasa. Okay, so cardiac output we just did. Cardiac output is heart rate times stroke volume. Okay, so this is the additional term. Now, here I just want to quickly derive for you. You will be doing this in more detail. This relationship, this formula that every student will know when they learn cardiovascular physiology is derived from the basic hemodynamics, okay, representing a single blood vessel. Okay, so this equation represents the whole of the cardiovascular system. Okay, but using the basic hemodynamics, and of course in physiology there's a lot of physics, the biophysics. Okay, flow in any tube, any single vessel is equal to the pressure or the difference in pressure, sometimes called driving pressure. So just to put a note here that the pulmonary circulation is considered separately and is not part of the systemic circulation. Okay, so this is done normally under your respiratory system. Okay, right. So let's move on. Okay, we take a break and look at this, and we go to the zoo. Okay, because by looking at this animal, it helps you, it reminds you why it is important to maintain normal or to regulate blood pressure. Anyone wants to answer this? What is perhaps the most important reason to maintain a normal blood pressure? By looking at the two giraffes. Any suggestion? Sorry?
The brain, Mr. Doctor. Prof.
Yeah, very good. Yeah, so this is essential to maintain blood flow to the brain. Okay, and this is cerebral circulation. Okay, so if you think about the giraffe, the brain is much higher from the heart. Heart is somewhere here, I think. Okay, so and even for the human beings, most of the day, your brain is above your heart. So because of gravity, the effect of gravity on the hydrostatic pressure, you actually need to maintain a normal blood pressure to supply a constant blood flow to the brain. Okay, so for the giraffe, it's even more effective. Okay, because the brain is much higher away from the heart. Okay, so this is perhaps one of the most important reasons why you need to maintain adequate blood pressure. So if your blood pressure drops, the first thing that will happen is that you will decrease blood flow to the brain, and what will happen to you? You will faint. Okay, you will faint. And when you faint, what will happen? When you faint, now you're horizontal. There is no longer effect of gravity. So actually, when you faint, it's a compensatory mechanism so that the blood flow becomes better. Okay, yeah. Okay, just keep this in mind. So let's move on. Okay, I think we can skip this. Okay, this is just a book I wrote. Okay. Okay. Now we come to, as I mentioned at the beginning, we are looking at key concept on the heart, the blood vessel, and then the last two things is blood volume and blood pressure. Okay, so all this will be covered in great detail as you enter into the actual lecture. But I want to give you a big picture. So what determines blood volume is important because whatever determines blood volume will affect your blood pressure. Okay, if you lose blood volume, your pressure will drop. Okay, so what determines blood volume? There are two things. One is something called the sodium balance. Yeah, so now you will do this only in greater detail when we look at the ginjal. Do you call it ginjal in Bahasa Indonesia? The kidney, we call it ginjal. The renal system. So this is actually under renal system, okay? Because the kidney controls the sodium balance, and the sodium balance affects the blood volume, okay? And the blood volume affects blood pressure. So this tells you that the kidneys, because it affects blood volume, has a role in blood pressure, okay? So although we think about blood pressure as cardiovascular system, at this stage, it is important to remember that in the more complete picture of blood volume, blood pressure, you need to think about both the heart and the kidneys. So sometimes we call this cardio-renal integrated blood volume, blood pressure control, okay? So just to give you the big picture so that you don't separate the kidney's role and the role of the cardiovascular in the control of blood volume, blood pressure. Okay. So anyway, this is the first point. The blood volume, which is part of extracellular fluid volume, is determined by sodium balance, and this is actually controlled by the kidneys. Okay. Now the second factor that affects blood volume is actually to do with osmotic pressure. Okay. And this is the osmotic pressure in the capillary, the microcirculation, capillary microcirculation. And the osmotic pressure that is due to plasma proteins is very important in the capillary. It produces something called capillary oncotic pressure. Now, these are again many new words that you haven't come across, but just to tell you that the osmotic pressure at the capillary due to plasma proteins is very important to help to maintain blood volume. Okay. Again, just ignore this. Okay. So I'm going to show you a picture to remind you, sorry, where are we? Okay, so again, there was 2 students from UII who came in so that the class can be more engaged. So it's not so tedious listening to me speak all the time. Okay. Anyway, we'll do this during the renal lecture. So are you familiar with this diagram? Okay. So this is intracellular fluid, and this is extracellular fluid outside here. Cell membrane is here. Now at the capillary, which is here, obviously the capillary separates the interstitial fluid from the plasma volume, okay? And so the oncotic pressure I just mentioned in the capillary is due to your plasma protein. This plasma protein oncotic pressure is very important to determine the movement of fluid from here to here, okay? So it helps to maintain the blood volume here in the capillary, okay? So I don't want to say so much because you haven't done in detail, but keep in mind that the plasma protein oncotic pressure in the capillary helps to maintain the blood volume in the capillary, okay? Yeah, so I'm going to skip the next few slides. Okay, these are questions for you to think about. I think we can skip that. Okay. Oh, this is just for fun. Maybe you want to. So medical students, this single best answer, think they are talented. Medical students may naturally become talented. Medical students can be stimulated to be talented. And now we use the word intrinsic. Medical students are intrinsically talented. And the last one, medical students can fake being talented. Maybe all of the above. Huh? Anyway. Okay, so you know cardiology, right? Cardiology is so this one sounds like cardiology. It's actually playing cards. So I call this cardology, okay? So maybe if some of you are creative and innovative, you can design some games using playing cards to learn about cardiovascular physiology. So you can call this cardology, okay? But anyway, let's move on to, okay, blood pressure. So we talked about blood volume. So the last part is blood pressure. Blood pressure, we already seen is blood pressure is cardiac output times TPR. And then you can expand this to blood pressure equal to heart rate times stroke volume times TPR. So this heart rate stroke volume is obviously the heart function, okay? Heart function. This TPR is obviously the blood resistance vessel, mainly at the arterioles, okay? At the arterioles. So when we talk about blood pressure regulation, we normally divide the control under short term and long term, okay? Short term, you will do in more detail very soon. Short term means it is mainly, almost entirely, due to neural control, neural reflex. Short term just means you have to respond very rapidly. For example, if the blood pressure drops, you must be able to control it very fast. So you need the neural mechanism. So the main neural mechanism is something called barrel reflex. You learn about this later. Okay, and this involves sympathetic nerves. Okay, sympathetic factor. So this is short term. Now the long term control of blood pressure is actually through controlling blood volume, which we have just mentioned. Okay, and I just said that this is through sodium balance control, and this is actually under the function of the kidney. Okay, kidney land. It sounds like Disneyland. Okay, so so the kidney controls sodium balance, and in doing so controls blood volume, and blood volume affects blood pressure. So you'll be learning this mainly in cardiovascular physiology, and you'll be doing this in more detail under renal physiology. Okay, so you need to integrate the two, cardio-renal mechanism, integrated mechanism in the overall control of blood pressure. Okay, so okay, let me just skip this so that we don't. Yeah, let me skip this. Okay. Yeah, so the last group of students, we had 5 sets 5 groups of students. There were 14 students who took part in UII. So let's hope we can do this for the renal lecture in April 16. So we can organize that, okay? So, okay, now we're on the last part, the kidneys control of blood volume. So you need to think about this now, even though this is cardiovascular physiology, because blood volume affects blood pressure. So in very simplified description, big picture, the renal control of blood volume is via regulating sodium balance, I just mentioned, as total body sodium. This is the same meaning. Sodium balance means total body sodium because it's the main determinant of ECV. Now, this is under endocrine already because this hormone is secreted by the kidney. Okay, so the renin is a hormone from the kidney. So it involves a family of hormones called the Renin-Angiotensin Aldosterone system. You will learn this in more detail later. So what will happen is that every time your blood volume drops, your blood pressure will drop. And when that happens, renin will always be secreted. Okay, let me say this again. Whenever blood volume drop and your blood pressure drop, you will always get secretion of renin from the kidney. It always happens. Okay, and the mechanism you learn later. Okay, and when renin is released, because your blood volume drop, it will activate a series of hormones, and then finally, this last hormone, aldosterone, is the one that will increase the sodium recovery or reabsorption from the kidney. So by recovering sodium, conserving sodium, what you will do eventually is to conserve the volume, because volume is linked to sodium balance, okay? So, and let me mention here is that when you have, this is now the sympathetic nerves to the kidney. So when you have stimulation of the sympathetic nerves to the kidney, it also releases renin. Okay, also releases renin. Okay, so let me just leave this to you. Okay, so I think we let's move on. Okay, so this is from my book. Just to remind you, I don't know whether you all watched Sesame Street. This is Elmo. This is the kind of triangle diagram. In recent years, I try to summarize small pieces of information into this kind of diagram. Okay, so sodium balance affects extracellular fluid volume, and blood volume is part of extracellular fluid volume. So sodium balance, because it affects blood volume, also affects blood pressure. Okay, so so that is why sometimes even your relatives or your parents will advise somebody, don't take so much salt if you have high blood pressure, right? There is some relationship there. High salt diet can affect your blood pressure, right? So the mechanism is most likely, one of the mechanism is most likely that the greater amount of sodium will affect the blood volume, and then the blood volume affects the blood pressure. Okay. Okay, so this diagram, let's just read the words here. Renal control of extracellular fluid or blood volume via regulating sodium balance affects the cardiac output. Okay, so look at this equation again. This is blood pressure is cardiac output times TPR. Okay, so we've just said that the sodium balance, total body sodium, affects blood pressure. How does this happen? Because total body sodium or sodium balance affects the blood volume, okay, through the function of the kidney. Okay, the kidney controls sodium balance, and so the kidney regulates blood volume. And this blood volume then affects this equation, because if you have a greater blood volume, you will have a greater venous return. And greater venous return means greater cardiac output, okay? So blood volume affects cardiac output because blood volume affects the venous return, the pembalikan vena, okay? Right, so these are all the integrated, okay? So I think, yeah, so let me skip this. This is just, okay. So yeah, let me end with one or two pictures and then we can open for question time. So this one is, because I don't know whether you have this kind of festival. This festival is among the Indian community in Malaysia, okay, where they decorate, I think during January, they will decorate the floor space with different kinds of designs. Most of the time it's flowers, trees, animals, all that. But one of my students and two of her friends went to India, okay, to India for their elective. And so they saw this picture in one part of India, in Pondicherry. And so they were very excited because normally you don't have this kind of cardio-renal, the heart and the kidneys in this kind of Indian festival. Okay, so she was very excited and sent this picture to me because she knows that I teach cardiac physiology, I teach renal physiology. So, and since then I've been using this every time I talk about cardio-renal control of blood volume and blood pressure. Okay, so this is very interesting. So now I show you these are the 3 students who went to India and saw this picture. So these are 3 students. And the reason why this student sent me the picture and because she knows that I would like it is because this student is my daughter. She went to India. So one of this person here is my daughter. Okay, single best answer. This is not my daughter, obviously. Okay, yeah, this is not my daughter. Okay, so which one is my daughter? This is not my daughter. This is my daughter. Yeah. So this was when she was in her 4th year medical school. So they went to India for elective. So now she's in Sabah, East Malaysia, doing her pediatrics. Yeah. So she just had a child last September. Yeah, and my first grandson. Yeah. Okay. So I think that may be the last slide. Okay, these are my students. So some of my first year students, just to show you what they look like in Malaysia. They look like all of you. And so this was a talk I gave recently in Philippines, I think. Is that correct? Yeah. So basically, I wanted to show that in this Corona season, although we can use Zoom online, and I'm very glad to see that all of you have your cameras turned on, because most of the time my students during class don't turn on their camera. So I only see black boxes, but at least they turn on here for this picture. So obviously they're putting their fingers or that. Okay. So what is missing in this Corona new normal or new abnormal is that we have lost the face-to-face contact, the eye contact, the body language is very different when I can see you all in class, and then the opportunity to just talk and discuss physiology. So these are some of the things hopefully we can recover post-COVID and post-vaccine. I hope this will be available soon. And hopefully I will get a chance, as Dr. Nisa has been trying to get me to visit Lampung and have a chance to interact with you personally in Sumatra. Okay, thank you very much for listening. I think this is the last slide. Yeah, okay, that's all.
Thank you, Prof. Thank you for this.
So I can stop sharing.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you for this present. Okay, student. Maybe we could continue the question, Prof. There's still
yes, we can do that. Yeah, please do that.
And maybe you could ask the student question. Maybe you have to test them to.
Yeah,
Still two questions, Prof, from student 2 or 4.
Okay. Okay. One question. What is the main determinant of blood volume? What is the main determinant of blood volume?
Okay, what is determinant?
There are 2 I mentioned.
Okay. Maybe you could write in chat, Prof.
No, I think I'm sure they can understand what is the.
Okay, student, you could ask the question.
There are 2, but you can just tell me one. What is the main determinant of blood volume?
Okay, what is the main determinant of the volume, blood
Could
flow.
I answer, sir?
Yes,
Okay.
please. Who is that?
Asmi Adha.
Ah, yeah,
I'm
hi,
sorry
hi.
if I'm wrong.
No problem.
There
Yeah.
is oncotic pressure
Okay.
and sodium balance.
Very good. Yeah. Full marks. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. And sodium balance and the capillary oncotic pressure. Yes. Very good. Yeah.
Sodium balance and oncotic blood
Pressure.
pressure.
Yeah.
Okay. Oncotic plasma pressure. Okay.
Right.
Other question, Prof? Or maybe you could answer the question from student.
Yes. What is the question? Let me.
From the Gatra. Okay. I ask you from Gatra first.
Agatra.
Gatra. Okay. He asks about. Okay.
Okay. Maybe I can read it myself. Gatra.
Okay.
Gatra
First
says.
question from Azmi, and then this case second question from Gatra.
Oh,
After of okay, Gatra Hadim.
Gatra question is on surfactant, respiratory system.
I give them lecture this morning about respiratory system, Prof.
Oh, okay, okay.
So I speak about surfactant.
Okay. Yeah, so Gatra is, yeah, I think we have to, there's an echo, we have to unmute. Yeah, I think, Dr. Nisa, you have to mute, yeah. So the question by Gatra is on the alveoli. So he says, what if the alveoli becomes flat, is it? Yeah, will it affect the blood pressure? Yeah, it's a theoretical question, because if the alveoli becomes flat, you don't need, in a sense, you won't be worrying about blood pressure, because if the alveoli is flat, you will die from lack of gas exchange. so obviously, if the alveoli, yeah, because when you do pulmonary circulation, we just said that the cardiac output is equal to the pulmonary blood flow, because the lungs receive the highest volume of blood flow, right? Because the pulmonary blood flow is equal to the right ventricle cardiac output. Okay, so your question is, in a sense, a theoretical one. So it's unlikely the alveoli becomes flat, by which time you will be dead, I think. Yeah, because I hope that answers the question. So shall I move to the next question? By who is this? Hana.
Ganesha, Prof. Ganesha Rahman, Prof.
There's one from Hana, I think.
No. Ganesha, Prof. Ganesha Rahman after Gatra, Prof. After Gatra.
No. There's another one. Hana Kanita. The question is, adrenaline increased stroke volume, whether it has something to do with the feeling of pressure in our chest. Now, I think the feeling of pressure in your chest is when you are exercising, is not is muscle physiology rather than cardiac muscle physiology. So I think it's different. The adrenaline is the one that increases the cardiac stroke volume. So the feeling of pressure in your chest is related to some skeletal muscle physiology. So it's not related. Okay, Ganesha. The question is, when the cardiac muscle has a stimulus by autonomic nerves and the heart rate increase, does the pacemaker or SA node stop the autorhythmicity? The SA node is always working. The autorhythmicity is always there. That's the property of a normal heart. Yeah. Okay. So next question is Rafa. Yeah, it would be better if you can unmute and ask. I'm sure your English is good enough, because so that at least other students can hear your voice. Okay, so that because this is a big platform, so at least it will be more interactive. But since you already typed it, Rafa, the fact that you can type means you can speak, I think.
Okay, Rafa, you can speak. Rafa, you can answer.
Yeah, Rafa,
directly, Rafa.
Yeah, it's better. Yeah. Where are you, Rafa?
Here.
Good. Yeah.
Good.
The fact that you can type such good English means you can speak. It's better to speak so that everybody can listen. Yeah, please, Rafa.
Thank you so much, Prof, for the opportunity for me to ask the question. So I would like to ask a question. As we all know that proper diet and a healthy lifestyle give an impact toward cardiovascular system, right? And then, for example, is a smoker will have plaque in their lungs, and for obese people, they will have an increased blood pressure, as far as I remember. And is there any other reason or example for us to keep a healthy diet and a healthy lifestyle? That's it for my question, Prof.
Oh, it's a health question. It's a general question.
Yeah, it's a general question.
Oh yeah, definitely. I think if you maintain a healthy lifestyle, it will obviously be better for your heart. Obviously, if you are exercising more regularly, your cardiac muscle is being activated more regularly, which obviously is good. Yeah. Okay. So for your blood vessel, obviously, if you have not so healthy diet, it can obviously lead to development of some of these what do you call it, plaques? Is it atherosclerotic plaques? Yeah. So so are there any other examples or reasons? I don't quite know what you're asking. Yeah, it's a general question. So obviously, definitely, regular exercise and physical activity is important for maintaining cardiovascular as well as respiratory health. Yeah. So I'm only giving you a very general answer to your general question. Okay, so there's one more question, right? Ahmad also, you can type so well. Let's hear your question. Ahmad Fatin, is it? Where are you?
Ahmad Fatin, come on. You could answer the question directly with Prof.
Thank you for the
Ahmad Fatin, Prof.
Yes.
Okay, let me spell my question. Good afternoon, Prof. The first, let me introduce myself. My name is Ahmad Fatin Al-Farizi. I have one question, Prof. When there is heavy bleeding, large volumes of blood flow out from our body. When that happens, will the heart automatically reduce the blood supply it pumps, or will it get stronger due to the shock effect received from the bleeding? I'm so sorry for my bad grammar. Shock. Thank you so much. It's
okay. Thank you for speaking. Don't worry about the lack of English fluency. It's not so important. Yeah, the fact you ask is good. Yeah. Okay. So it's a good question. It's about when you lose blood. Now you will do this in more detail. When you lose blood, there are two important compensation in physiology. One is the immediate compensation is to try to maintain blood pressure so that you don't die. Okay, because if you lose blood volume, your blood pressure will drop. Okay, so the immediate, that's why we call it a short-term control, is to try to, you may not be able to bring the blood pressure back to normal, but at least it is slightly better so that you don't die. So this is what you call short-term. there's a neural reflex, baroreflex, okay? Now the long term obviously takes longer time. Since you have lost blood volume, it takes a while, a few days maybe, for the blood volume to be restored. You have to recover the blood volume. So that will take a longer time, and it involves the kidney to recover the sodium, to recover the fluid, or that, yeah. So this is the cardiorespiratory compensation for blood loss, yeah. So all this you'll be learning in great detail as you move into cardiovascular physiology, control of blood pressure, and also into renal physiology, yeah. It's an important question, right?
Thank you very much, Prof.
Okay.
Okay, student, is there any question? Maybe you could directly ask to Prof. Cheng Hwee Ming. Prof. Cheng.
Can I ask a question?
Okay, who is it?
Yes, please.
Okay. Prof. Cheng.
Okay,
First of all, good afternoon. Let me introduce myself. My name is Dafa Fakriza. One of my cousins have a high blood pressure disease. He went to the doctor, and the doctor told him to drink a pill that will make his blood pressure gets better. But now, every time he's tense, he said that it feels like I want to fall, and his view gets so dark. Then he went again to the doctor, and the doctor diagnosed that he suffers a low blood pressure disease. And my question is it an overdose caused by the pill, or it's a better response from his body? I mean, he drank the pill to get better blood pressure, but if the pill makes another disease, so how can he get cured, Prof? Thank you for
what is the pill? Do you know the pill? What is the name of the pill? Do you know what it is? What is the pill given to him?
Medicine. What is the drug? You can give explanation about the drug, the pill.
I don't know what a pill is, but
it's possible that if that pill is used to lower blood pressure, and if you take too much, obviously you may develop hypotension. So normally patients on prescribed anti-hypertensive drug, they have to monitor their blood pressure every day, so that if on certain days the blood pressure is normal or slightly low, then maybe they won't take so much. Yeah. So you have to monitor. Yeah. So I don't know what was given to your cousin. Was it in a hospital or was it by some alternative medicine?
Hospital, Prof.
Hospital. Okay, right. Yeah. So yeah, when you find out the name of the pill, you can tell me. You can text me.
Yes, Prof.
It has to clear about the pills before we could conclude what is the effect of the pills to the body from the patient. So if you want to make anamnesis, you should to know what is the pill, what is the medicine. So that's the effect from the pill that make the patient feel dark, and anything else, some side effect, maybe not from the pills, maybe from his activity, maybe from his food, not only from its pill. Maybe like that from Cheng, because a doctor is very general aspect, general decision to make a conclusion. Okay, maybe the other student want to ask. Maybe Asmi have another question. Asmi, you are the first questioner in this. Asmi, maybe you have another question. We have an expert here. He has a few books, and maybe I will share for all of you. Maybe Prof. Cheng could give you a link to get his
book. The book is it's not. I don't think it's available in Indonesia. Although there's a supplier in Indonesia. So the book is, most of the books, my books are out of print now. So, so I don't think you can get it in Indonesia. Yeah. Did I give you some sample copy, Dr. Nisa?
Yeah, okay.
No, did I already give you? Did I already give you a copy some time ago?
I have just maybe only three books of you, Prof. But
oh, you
not
have, okay.
cardiovascular. But I haven't had cardiovascular book
Oh,
yet.
okay, right. So you have the renal one, huh?
Yes, renal, homeostatic, basic thing, basic physiology, and the renal and neurophysiology. Okay.
So the cardiovascular book that I showed you in my PowerPoint, unfortunately, we cannot travel. Maybe the next time I see you in a conference somewhere, I'll pass you a copy of the book.
Yes, on April, in next meeting we will explain about our subject about renal physiology. Maybe you could give us about the cardiovascular book to read by student.
Okay, yeah.
On April, Prof. Maybe I'll give you the schedule. On WA. Okay. Okay, student, if there any question before we close the lecture class? Okay, seems there's no question, Prof. Maybe sorry because we haven't prepared with small group first for activity, but it's okay. I think there's active enough for student to ask and answer.
Yes,
it's I am a bit amazed with them. Okay, Prof. Maybe before we close the lecture class, you could give the student closing clue or closing note about cardiovascular physiology system, Prof. Physiology, Prof.
Yeah, there is no shortcut to understanding physiology. You just need to spend more time reading around some standard textbook. Your PowerPoint obviously a guide, but it will be useful to read around any standard text to get a good perspective of how the physiology is explained, because physiology requires understanding. So the way things are explained becomes important. Whereas learning anatomy is more memory work. You just need to learn the keywords. But physiology, you need to be able to understand cause and effect. So so
Prof,
try to read around.
Prof. Sorry, Prof. Excuse me, Prof. Maybe before you finish your closing statement, there's still left one question, bro.
Oh,
there's
okay.
still left one question for the last. Maybe the last question.
Okay, can the person ask me directly? I think it's better.
Anselmus Libreria, Sinolinga. I have one question, Prof.
Please unmute yourself and speak. It's better, I think.
Okay. Good afternoon, Prof. Thank you for this opportunity. First, let me introduce myself. My name is Anselmus Libreria Sinolinga. I have one question, Prof. I often get a fast heartbeat for no reasons. Mostly it's happened when I remember or imagine one of my past memory. The memory is randomly taken from my head. I want to ask, are there any steps that I can do to decrease or to remove it? I thank you so much for this opportunity. It's such an honor for me to ask.
Yeah, so these memories that you remember make your heart beat faster, right?
Yes, Prof.
Are they pleasant memories, or they could be pleasant memories or not so pleasant memories, right?
Yes, Prof. It's randomly taken.
Yeah, so I think this is just a natural response. Some memories, whether they are good or bad, can stimulate the heart rate. Yeah, I don't think you can do anything about it. Yeah. Yeah, it doesn't disturb you, right? I mean, it just makes you, when you remember something, it makes you either excited or, a different kind of feeling. That's why your heart beat faster. Yeah. So it's just a natural response from the higher centers here.
Okay, Prof. Thank you for your
still homeostatic, Prof. Still homeostatic response.
Thank you, Anselmus, for the question. Yeah.
Okay, Prof. I think that's all question, and maybe continue for the note for student before we finish our class.
Right. Okay. So I will send you this PowerPoint slide, and please share it freely with your students.
Okay, Prof.
Yeah.
Okay, Prof. Thank you for your lecture. It's very great for me, and thank you so much. And with all my respect, thank you for your contribution for the student.
And also, I will try to include a contact slide in the PowerPoint so that if you are revising your physiology, I will include an extra slide with my email as well as my WhatsApp, so you can feel free to contact me so that if you're studying, just
Okay.
So,
So students
I'll try to include that contact slide and then send the PowerPoint to Dr. Nisa to distribute to all of you.
Okay. Thank you so much, Prof. Thank you, student. Maybe that's enough for our class today. Before that, I say thanks again for Prof. Cheng Hwee Ming for your time to give us contribution about cardiovascular system physiology. That's all. Thank you for all your participants. Thank for the administration and the IT. Okay, thank you, Prof. Maybe we close the class. Before that, wabillahi taufiq wal hidayah. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Selamat sore.
Bye.
Terima kasih, Prof. Cheng.
Bye.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Bye.
Anak-anak, terima kasih. Nanti saya akan coba berikan pertemuan saripatinya. Saya akan coba untuk memberikan resume dari apa yang diberikan oleh Prof. Cheng. Sekaligus saya akan sharing PPT yang sudah diberikan oleh beliau. Terima kasih untuk kerjasamanya. Terima kasih untuk kehadirannya. Mudah-mudahan ini menjadi awalan yang luar biasa untuk kalian dan teman-teman kalian. Dan ke depan pada pertemuan kedua, mudah-mudahan kalian sudah lebih aktif lagi dan kita lebih siap lagi dengan pertemuan yang kedua dari Prof. Cheng Hwee Ming. Baik, terima kasih. Wabillahi taufiq wal hidayah. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Terima kasih Pak Herman. Assalamualaikum. Izin live.
Waalaikumsalam. Terima kasih dokter.
Terima kasih dokter.
Waalaikumsalam. Terima kasih dokter.